All right, we will get started in our class this morning on the minor prophets. And again, we are spending last week, this week, and we will next week on the roots of idolatry in Israel, just bringing us up to that point of time when the minor prophets and the major prophets will be doing their work. And last week we looked at from the beginning, Adam, clear up through, and we actually went up to the time of Solomon, the divided kingdom. That's a good place to separate it, and before we get on over into the minor prophets. We looked at the time stamps just to give us an idea of the time frames so we don't get confused on that. And again, those are just essentially estimates, I would say. It's hard to be exact on them, but it gives us an idea where each thing is. And we ended up with looking at the 12 tribes and the map of the 12 tribes and where they were supposed to inherit in the land. And what we're going to do today is a look again at the roots of idolatry in Israel. Remember, this nation was to be set aside for God. They were set apart. They were supposed to be a holy nation. They were to drive the idolaters out. And they did not do that. And if you look at Judges chapter 1, beginning with verse 27, the kind of the heading here in the chapter is failure to complete the conquest. Okay, it starts off with Manasseh. They didn't drive out people, but in verse 29, and Ephraim did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer, so the Canaanites lived in Gezer among them. Okay, and Ephraim, again, that was a fairly good size tribe, and that is where you might say was the center of the confederation, the center of the 12 tribes of Israel to begin with. And of course, a lot of the cities that are talked about, Bethel and Hebron, all of those are kind of in that area, especially Bethel. And so it's important for us to understand when they didn't drive those Canaanites out and decided we'll let them live there but we'll tax them or we'll make them slaves, they became a burden to them, to the children of Israel. Now, we talked about Ephraim there in verse 29, but if you go over to verse 34, the Amorites pressed the people of Dan back into the hill country, for they did not allow them to come down to the plain. So you see this territory that was allotted to Dan, Dan's supposed to take clear over to the coast, the Mediterranean coast. And over in this area, there's a little bit of coastal plain. There's a region that's in here called the Shephelah, and that's the breadbasket of Israel. That's where they grow most of their crops and stuff before you get into the really mountainous area. Well, the Amorites lived in there, and they weren't going to be moved out. They kept the tribe of Dan back here in the mountains. So Dan did not have a lot of land, but Dan didn't really pursue and chase them out like they should have. And that's going to be the basis of our lesson this morning when we look at Ephraim and Dan. All right? Because we want to look at the roots of idolatry in Israel. If you would turn in your Bibles to Judges chapter 17. There was a man of the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah. Now, remember the map there. I showed you where the hill country of Dan, they didn't get down to the coastal region. Well, up in that hill country of Ephraim, just north of there, man lived. His name was Micah. And he said to his mother, and this is just where the story picks up, the 1,100 pieces of silver that were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse, and also spoke it in my ears. In other words, I heard you speak this curse. Behold, the silver is with me. I took it. So what's he saying?
Stole from his mama.
He stole from his mother. He stole the silver. And his mother said, not, how could you do such a thing? Look at this. Blessed be my son by the Lord. What? My son's a thief. Blessed be my son. Okay. Verse 3. And he restored the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother. And his mother said, I dedicate the silver to the Lord from my hand to my son to make a carved image and a metal image. Now therefore I will restore it to you. So she's saying, these 1,100 pieces of silver, what I was going to do with this was make an idol for you. Okay? An image, a carved image, and a metal image. So, since I was going to do that for you, and it wasn't stolen, you've restored. Now, I'm going to give it back to you to have this done. Okay? To make an idol, or a couple of idols. Verse 4. So when he restored the money to his mother took, he says, wait a minute, no, you need to take it and get the idols made. All right? His mother said, I dedicate the silver to the Lord for my son to make the carved image. Now therefore I will restore it to you. I think what that is, he might be even repeating what his mother had said, but I'm giving it back to you so you can make these for me. So when he restored the money to his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave it to the silversmith and made it into a carved image and a metal image. You see anything funny going on there?
Well, she was going to make an idol out of all of them. Now she's making an idol out of part of it.
So she keeps the 900 pieces of silver. Kind of like mother, like son. You know, where's the morality and ethics in all of this? And it was it was made into a carved image and metal image, and it was in the house of Micah. And the man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and household gods, and ordained one of his sons, who became his priest. One of his sons. Now he's of the tribe of Ephraim. And remember where the priests came from?
Levi.
Tribe of Levi. But he couldn't, well, as we delve into the story, we're going to see strange things happening all over. But he takes one of his sons, ordains him to be a priest, and has him do his worship for him. In other words, here's the carved image. You make up the worship service, and you take care of this image, and you offer the sacrifices to it and everything. So, verse 6. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. So not only what we would say politically, morally, religiously. They're doing the same thing. Now listen, there were other instances of idolatry in Israel. You remember the story of Gideon, okay? Gideon and his trumpet, right? Well, before Gideon could do anything, he had to destroy the idol grove that his father had made. All right? So there are other stories, but this one is the one that really leads up to what we're going to study later. Okay? How this downfall of the northern kingdom took place. So it's the hill country of central Palestine, the region set aside for the inheritance descendants of Ephraim. No king in Israel. It was a confederation. All right? Each tribe kind of ruled themselves. So there was very little law and order. Micah was a thief, stole from his mother. He was also superstitious. He believed a curse his mother had put on the money, so he gives it back. Idolatry has deep roots in superstition, doesn't it? You think about it. Yeah. So, spoke in his ear means, may also indicate he heard her pledge the silver to making him the idols. That's where we would come up with that from earlier. So notice her attitude. Again, blessed be the Lord. Blessed is my son. What a good thing. Nobody stole it. My son stole it. But it's still within the family. So she pronounces that blessing on him. And what she doing, she's actually leading her son into idolatry and making these idols for him. And she takes the 1,100 pieces of silver, or 1,100 shekels. Here's 200. She gives to the founder. She apparently keeps the 900. So he's kind of dissatisfied that he's got these things, but he also needs an ephod, according to verse 5, which is a girdle, specifically an ephod or high priest shoulder piece, also generally an image or an ephod. But the ephod, lots of times that was used for prophesying, and they put gems in it. Now, that's, if you go back and read, the high priest of Israel, Moses' brother Aaron had an ephod. It had 12 stones in it representing the 12 tribes of Israel. But if there was a question, certain of those stones would light up, apparently.
It's like a breastplate type.
It's like a breastplate, but it had those stones in it, and those stones would light up. It was for, we would say divination, but that one actually the Holy Spirit would be working with or through. All right? So he has those made, and he has some other household gods made, like a teraphim, as a kind of idol used in household, as a household shrine for like household worship. Kind of like maybe some things that, we might have a little cross, or some people have Buddhas or the little elephant, in there. May not mean anything to us, but to them it had a little bit of significance. And if you remember back in the book of Genesis, when Jacob leaves his father-in-law's house to go back to Canaan, Rebecca took some of the household gods. You'd have to go back, and her father's more upset about the household gods being taken than he is about the daughters. So anyway, these are just some of the things that we're looking at in here. So we want to look at the introduction of erroneous religious authority. Okay, so he's got the idols. He makes his son a priest, but that's not going to be good enough. Now there was a young man of Bethlehem, excuse me, in Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. So he's a dual tribal citizenship, right? So at some point along the line, maybe his father was from Judah and his mother was from Levi, or maybe his father was a Levite and his mother was from Judah. But anyway, he uses these two to kind of get the best situation that he can out of things. But he was sojourning in Judah. And the man departed from the town of Bethlehem in Judah to sojourn where he could find a place. And he journeyed, as he journeyed, he came to the hill country of Ephraim to the house of Micah. And we're going to call this man Jonathan. Okay? You'll know why later, but we're going to call him Jonathan. Verse 9, and Micah said to Jonathan, I am a Levite of Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm going to sojourn where I may find a place. Remember, the Levites did work around the tabernacle or in various places in each of the tribes. But they were supposed to be supported by the tithes to do good work, helping people, whatever. But he's looking for some. It may be the case that he was run out of town, so he's going someplace else to see where he can go next. All right? That's kind of the impression that I get. I could be wrong, but that's the impression I get. Where I may find a place. Excuse me. And Micah said to him, stay with me and be to me a father and a priest, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year and a suit of clothes and your living. And the Levite went in. All right? Stay with me and be a father and a priest. What do you mean by a father and a priest?
Says he became one of his sons.
No, the Levite's going to become his father and a priest.
Well, as a priest, he's asking him to be a priest for the, is that the priest for the idol? To take his son's place or be equivalent to his son?
To take his son's place.
Okay.
We're going to finish this in a moment. But what would it mean to be a father here?
Evidently he may have not had a father, and maybe this Jonathan might be older than what we think, and he's old enough to be like a father figure to him.
Okay? You're looking in a physical, genealogical sense. Think of it in a religious sense.
Like what the Catholics have today.
As a what?
In a religious sense.
As a high priest?
Well, what do the Catholics call their priests?
Father.
Father. You're going to be the religious authority for me. You're going to be a priest to do the work, but you're going to be a father. You're going to be the religious authority. See that? Okay? You will be a father and a priest, and I'm going to pay you to do that. Okay? I'm going to pay you to do the worship for me. I'm going to pay you to do the sacrifices for me. Isn't that isn't that exactly what happens in the Catholic Church? When you go to a Catholic church, the priest does the worship. The Father does the worship and you sit there and watch. Anything along those lines, and that's the Reformation churches too. Okay? Episcopalian, Presbyterian, all of those with Reformation churches. The worship goes on up here at the altar, and those people back there, they're just watching. Okay?
And most likely don't understand most of what's going on because they don't speak Latin and Hebrew and whatever language the priest may be fluent in.
Quite likely, yes. Okay? So, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. He was there in his household, but he's paying him to be there and to do this work. Then Micah said, now I know that the Lord will prosper me because I have a Levite as a priest. Maybe he wasn't being prospered because he had his son as his priest, but now he's got a Levite as a priest, and a Levite, listen, all priests were Levites, but not all Levites were priests. But what's his mode of thought here? Materialism. Now the Lord will bless me. I've got a Levite with my idols as a priest. The Lord's got to be happy with me.
The Levite had deviated from the commands.
Why? Why would the Levite do that?
A place to
It was
live.
paid to. That was
Yeah.
Because he's of the same mindset, isn't he? This guy's going to pay me to do this. Well, that's what I'm here for, right? And there are, well, I think there are a lot of people out here who claim to be preachers, evangelists, and such, who have that same mindset. Whatever they want me to do, I'll do as long as they pay me.
They're still engaging in the works that they do to get favor with God.
Well, yeah. Well, they think they are. Some would think they are, but for him, the Lord will prosper. How's the Lord going to prosper him if he's got idols?
Right.
See, he's missing that mark from there. So,
you can't have them both.
well, why?
You can't have the Lord and the idols.
No, you can't. And you can't have what Jesus said. You cannot serve God and mammon, or God and money. And he's got money on his mind. Whatever I have to do, whatever good luck charm to get money. All right? Well, here, Ephraim didn't drive out these Canaanites, and Dan didn't drive out these Amorites, and they're still there and they're prosperous. Maybe the Lord that Israel's serving isn't as strong as the Lord that those people are serving. So if I get some of their gods in here, maybe that will help. If something goes wrong, who do we blame first? God. It's God's fault, right? Why isn't God blessing me? Well, why am I not doing God's will? And listen, God hasn't promised to bless us. How do I want to put it? God hasn't promised to make us rich. I kind of use that phraseology. God has promised that we'll have what we need if we follow him, because we'll put things in order. this guy's looking for shortcuts, right? Shortcuts. All right, but that idolatry is really going to infect Dan. Remember that map that we had up there? They didn't get part of the land. They need more land, and we've talked about that before. Chapter 18, verses 1 through 5. In those days there was no king in Israel. So what did people do? What was right in their own eyes, okay? In those days, the tribe of the people of Dan was seeking for itself an inheritance to dwell in, for until then, no inheritance among the tribes of Israel had fallen to them. Well, they just had that little piece in the hill country, but it wasn't big enough. So the people of Dan sent 5 able men from the whole number of their tribe, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, hope I'm pronouncing that right, to spy out the land and to explore it. And they said to them, go and explore the land. And they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. When they were by the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. Does that mean they knew this guy?
Evidently.
Apparently they knew him well. They recognized his voice.
Yeah. They recognized the voice of the young Levite, and they turned aside and said to him, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is your business here? And he said to them, this is how Micah dealt with me. He has hired me, and I have become his priest. They said to him, inquire of God, please, that we may know whether the journey on which we are setting out will succeed. And the priest said to them, go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord. But here's the question. Is this guy a true prophet or a false prophet? True priest, false priest.
False priest.
Yeah, he isn't serving the Lord, but he says he is. Just like Micah says this will be pleasing to the Lord. So the Danites, from verses 5 down to verse 12, they search through the land. They find that piece of property way up in the north I talked about before, up above Manasseh on the east side of the Jordan, and a place called Laish. And in verse 13 of chapter 18, we'll pick up there. And they passed on from there to the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. They're going up to attack Laish and take the country because there's not very many forts or fortified cities up there. It'd be easier for us to take that than it will be to do what God said and drive the Amorites out down here. Verse 14, then the 5 men who had gone out to scout the country of Laish said to their brothers, do you know that in these houses there are an ephod, household gods, a carved image, and a metal image? And now therefore consider what you will do. And they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite at the home of Micah and asked him about his welfare. Hey, Jonathan, how you doing, bud? You told us our journey would be okay. We'd find some stuff. That worked out fine for us. We found a place where we're going to go and we're going to take it. And verse 16, now the 600 men of the Danites, armed with their weapons of war, stood by the entrance of the gate. And the 5 men who had gone out to scout out the land went up and entered and took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the metal image. They just took them. While the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with weapons of war. And when these men went into Micah's house and took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the metal image, the priest said to them, what are you doing? And they said to him, keep quiet, put your hand on your mouth and come with us and be to us a father and a priest? Is it better for you to be a priest to the house of one man, or to be a priest to a tribe and a clan in Israel?" And the priest's heart was glad, and took the ephod and household gods and the carved image, and went along with the people. I got a bigger payday coming. This has really worked out good for me. All right. So, of course, Mike is kind of upset, but what can he do against 600 armed men? All right. Kind of getting what he deserved, though, isn't he? Verses 27 through 31. This is where idolatry, the tribe of Dan makes idolatry their tribal religion. Not Yahweh worship, but idolatry. Verse 27. But the people of Dan took what Micah had made, and the priests who belonged to him, and they came to Laish, to a people quiet and unsuspecting, and struck them with the edge of the sword, and burned the city with fire. We're going to drop down to verse 30. And the people of Dan set up the carved image for themselves, and Jonathan the son of, listen to this, Jonathan the son of Gershom. Remember who Gershom was? Gershom was the son of Moses. Moses had two sons. Gershom was one of them. And this Jonathan was a descendant of Moses. Moses was of the tribe of Levi, right? And Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. And they set up Micah's carved image that he made, as long as the house of God was at Shiloh, as long as the tabernacle was at Shiloh. That image was the official place of worship for the tribe of Dan. So after they established themselves in the land, they set up this false religion, this idolatry, and that's kind of like the beginning of the idolatry that later split Israel from Judah and sent the northern kingdom into captivity. Micah's carved image was destroyed when David became king. The tabernacle was at Shiloh. David, I believe, moved it to Jerusalem. But in the days of Solomon, the temple was built. But David's the one who united the kingdoms, destroyed the idols in the land. Now, look, you can destroy idols, but it's hard to destroy idolatry from people's hearts. Okay? They still had idolatry in their hearts. So it's destroyed at the time of King David. The idolatrous priesthood served the Danites until the destruction of Samaria, though. It didn't kill off the idolatrous priesthood. They were still there for another couple hundred years. Well, what did they do? Well, at the division of the kingdoms in Rehoboam's time, remember when we ended with Solomon, okay? In his son's time, Rehoboam, the kingdom split. And Jeroboam, we'll talk about him next week, I'm pretty sure. Jeroboam takes the 10 tribes of the north, but Jeroboam puts a golden calf, one at Bethel down in Ephraim, and another golden calf in Dan, and tells the people, you don't need to go to Jerusalem to worship, here's where you can worship. And those priests served that golden calf in Dan. They just continued on, go from one idol to another idol.
They went from silver to gold.
Silver to gold. Hey, bigger payday. So, that's where we're going to go kind of look at next week. Start with looking at the prophecy concerning Jeroboam, and back to getting on this track so that we understand the mechanics of it, the history of it, how these people could do what they were doing. And remember, it was all choice. It was all choice. They chose to do this. They weren't that far removed from, well, I have to say, they come into the promised land 40 years after coming out of Egypt. And then you got about 400 years of the period of Judges. If Micah, the account that we just looked at, that isn't too long, is it? How long has the United States been a country? A little bit over 200 years, yeah? That's not a whole lot of time when you think about it. I saw something on Facebook. You go back from the time, what was that? Well, let's just take, like the fourth turning. 2020. You go back 80 years and you have 1940, right? And that was the start of the Second World War. So the people who, that's just a little bit before our time, okay? But our parents lived at that time, okay? You think 80 years before that was 1860. Their parents were pretty close to that Civil War period. That wasn't very long ago, was it?
I saw,
And 80
It
years
was
before
probably
that,
something
and
I was
80 years
looking at
before
on
that was a revolution.
I don't watch TV a lot, but something I watched apparently on the internet, historical thing. In the 1930s, people were still coming to town on horses and in wagons. That was just 20 years before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in 51. We look at that as ancient times. Of course, there were automobiles at the time, but people couldn't afford them. A lot of people couldn't. But people still lived in a self-sustaining manner. They were farmers. They raised their meat. They couldn't afford to go to town. They didn't go to Walmart or Safeway or whatever to buy groceries. If they did, it was very little. They were kind of hunter-gatherers still in the 1930s. And what we see on TV is the Roaring Twenties and all, which was a very small piece of society. Now these tribes, we talk about them as individuals, but you think about all the years that they were together, you would think that there was a lot of intermarrying from one tribe to the other. So this influence of these idols was probably greater than that little piece of Dan.
Yes.
Because of, you know, the marriages and the integrated families, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, throughout. Also remember, Ephraim and Manasseh were the two sons of Joseph, right? Who was their mother?
Yoshibel.
Would you repeat that, please?
Who was Joseph's wife? Wasn't she the daughter of the priest in Egypt?
I don't know.
I believe so. I mean, that's a lot of it came with them. A lot of it came with them from Egypt. But then they didn't drive them out like they should have. And it led to problems. All right. Can we leave it there?
Sure.
It's very good.
Leave it there. But again, explaining why these things happen. And here it is, choices that people and even groups of people make that can take them away from God. And then they wonder why bad things happened. Thank you for your time. Thank you.